Good evening and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rasool. Tonight we are going to be speaking about harmful cultural norms, which are basically beliefs around people, places and things that are not based on fact. One example could be that women are bad drivers, we are not. But some cultural norms cause harm to other people. One example of that, and it's an extreme one, is apartheid. It was based on the belief that black people are inferior and white people are superior race. And then they built a whole system of oppression around that. We know that that belief is completely untrue. Tonight we're going to be speaking about harmful cultural norms and how it contributes to violence against women. Joining me in studio after the break is Nandipha Ganya, who is the program manager at MOSAIC, an organization for training, healing and service. But before that, we're going to have a look at a short video that explains what are cultural norms and how they contribute to how we live our lives. Let's have a look.
Imagine a world in which women and men are equal partners at home, at work, and in society, with full power and opportunity to reach their dreams. At Chipaigo, we too imagine this world, but we also know we have work to do. In 27 countries, women are still required by law to obey their husband. And globally, 1 in 3 women has experienced physical or sexual violence. Violence often leads to injury, disease, mental health problems, and sometimes death. It also robs women and girls of their right to achieve their fullest potential. In Rwanda, we trained over 1,500 health workers to reach over 17,000 survivors of gender-based violence with critical health services. Sometimes, when women don't have a voice within the home, they can't get to a health facility when they need care for themselves and their children. But when fathers get involved in their family's health, violence is reduced, maternal and child survival improves, and breastfeeding goes up. In Mozambique, we worked with community healthcare workers to improve their skills and knowledge around gender and health. And they helped over 30,000 couples to create joint birth plans. Gender discrimination by healthcare workers can expose women to privacy violations, health procedures without consent, coercion, and physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Chipaigo helps healthcare workers to take action to ensure that gender-sensitive, respectful services are provided to all clients. Harmful, unspoken, and discriminatory rules about how men, women, and gender minorities should behave are known as gender norms. These norms limit women and girls' right to make decisions about their bodies, daily lives, and futures. We know that changing gender norms balances the scales of power. In Tanzania, we reached over 147,000 people through community dialogues about gender norms. This is transforming how both women and men think, talk, and make equitable health decisions. And in Ethiopia, Chipaigo is working to improve performance, retention, and graduation rates by training over 10,000 female health students and providing financial aid to 1,600 more. We're proud of what we're doing, but we're also far from done. Empowering women and girls is not enough. If they return to their families and communities where gender inequality is not being addressed, the cycle will continue. We envision a world in which women and girls can achieve their dreams. It's not the world we live in yet, but it could be. It would take all of us, women, men, communities, and systems to reach this goal. Chipaigo, saving lives, improving health, and transforming futures for her, for families, for everyone.
That was a short video on how cultural norms affect our lives. We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You are still watching the Womxn Show, and today we are speaking about harmful cultural norms. And joining us in studio is Nandipha Ganya, who is the Programs Manager at MOSAIC Training Service and Healing Center. Nandipha, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you and your viewers.
So Nandipha, around Heritage Day, MOSAIC sent out a press release stating that harmful cultural norms still contribute to domestic violence and violence against women. And so one of the things we're going to do is work through some of those, but I wanted us to start by looking at what is a norm. I've described it as a belief, but maybe you could elaborate on that.
So a norm really is something that through generations, through practice, has come into being a way of doing something. So for example, a norm could be described as something that you, in order to do something, you do it this way. So when we speak about gender norms and things like that, we're speaking about things that have been crafted over years, over generations, over centuries, that then prescribe to us how certain things are done in regards to certain genders and gender roles and gender expectations.
One of the first norms that were mentioned was around keeping, domestic violence is a family matter. And it was interesting to me because it made me think that violence against anyone else is a crime. Your neighbor, we've got road rage in the street, someone hits you, or anything really, even verbal violence at a store we see blow up. And yet as soon as you add domestic to that term, domestic violence, it happens in the home, it's supposed to be, it's automatically not seen as a crime. So could you help us understand why do people view domestic violence as a private family matter as opposed to, I think the press release called it a public issue?
If there's an altercation in a home, for example, and the neighbors hear, that something is not okay next door, that often they won't get involved because they often view it as it's a family matter. I mean, you don't interfere in the matters of two people. All of these sort of terms and the ways that have now been or have now come into how we explain and talk about domestic violence and violence within a home are the exact reasons why domestic violence is viewed as a private family matter. So if someone sees, an altercation between a couple, or between family members and doesn't intervene because it's a family, then, or it's because it's people that are in a relationship and therefore you don't, you don't insert yourself in other people's business. You don't intervene in family issues. The family needs to talk it out. It's those kinds of things that have led to domestic violence being viewed as a private family matter, when actually it is not a private family matter, because ultimately what happens in the home often reflects what is happening in the society or in the community more broadly, which often reflects what is happening in the country more broadly. So we're seeing a lot of violence within homes because there's a lot of violence within our communities. There's a lot of violence in the country. So violence in itself has become a norm and it's become a way of being in our communities and in our homes. And that is where the problem begins, because it's not just a private family matter. I mean, as you explained now, there can be road rage. There can be so many other forms of violence that take place outside of the home, and those are seen as a crime because that's exactly what it is. But ultimately, the violence itself is reflective of what our society is and how we are relating to each other as a society, which is more broad than just violence within the family, which then says that, domestic violence is not just a family matter, but really a problem that we should be seeing as a society as a problem that affects us all, not just that particular family or that particular couple.
I wanted to ask you, so, in relation to what you were saying earlier about how norms come about, I'm often fascinated by the fact that, traditionally or historically, actually beating your wife was not, or violence within the family was not legally a crime. And we've seen this also when we look at the corporal punishment that was banned recently in the home and the backlash against that. Do you think that that also contributes to it? And the fact that it is now a crime is sort of a new concept that people have to wrap their heads around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you're bringing up corporal punishment, because really that is where sort of this equating violence to love and equating violence to discipline and violence to, you know, wanting you to be better. That's where it stems from. Because if you are hitting your child, and it's a very contentious issue at the moment, because lots of people are, you know, upset about corporal punishment being banned and all of that. But ultimately, it is a form of violence. And as children, it's very important how we socialize our children, because as children, the message that then sends is that I'm hitting you because I want you to do better. I want you to be better. And you know, the way that we raise children, or that we are supposed to raise children, is really out of love, and it's really out of care, and is to show them and to teach and instill values within them. So we are instilling then, you know, by using sort of these forms of violence, such as corporal punishment, you know, instilling in them that violence can be used as a way to achieve something else. So, for example, to achieve or to help or to craft this person to become a better person, which is not the way to do it. So, you know, both people then, both boys and girls, also grow into this way of thinking that the use of violence within a relationship context, whether that relationship is family in the sense of a parent and child, or whether that relationship is an intimate relationship between two partners, that the use of violence is then okay, because the use of violence means that there is love within this relationship, whatever the context of that relationship is. And that is the problem, because there are many ways to show love, and violence is not one of those ways.
The narrative a lot of times now, when women leave abusive relationships, we are talking about red flags at the beginning, which were not necessarily viewed as violent, but are actually forms of violence. And so some of those things would be control, so controlling movements. This would be, he's checking in all the time. I'm fascinated by the fact, by people's perceptions of jealousy. So excessive jealousy might also be translated into love. And is this some of the norms that you see coming out during the work at MOSAIC, when people come in, when they are dealing with abusive relationships?
Sorry. Yeah, because central to an abusive relationship, right, is that element of control, and that element of abuse of power over the other. So this would then play out in an abusive relationship in many forms, and often it can play out in other forms of abuse. So, for example, or abusive behavior. So, for example, like mental and psychological abuse, right? Because the use of that, or the abuse of that power and the use of that control over the other is then a means to make the other feel less than. So this woman, often in many relationships in our work, the majority of our beneficiaries are women. So often the woman will come in with a diminished sense of self, because of the sustained sort of psychological and mental abuse that they've endured in their relationships. And this comes with that strong use of power, and that abuse of power and that control that exists in that relationship. So often they will say things like, I was unable to make plans without him. If I make plans without him, he gets very upset. If I don't check in at a certain time, he gets upset. I have to speak to certain people. I can't go to certain places. So that limits their movement, right? So there's a lack of autonomy that comes with that controlling behavior. And it can be very subtle as well. So it's not necessarily that this controlling behavior in the relationship is going to manifest or show up as aggressive behavior. It can be very subtle things as well that the women might not even realize that actually this was a red flag, or this was a controlling relationship that I was in, or an abusive relationship that I was in. So if the things that are done within the relationship by the other partner make you feel insecure, make you feel guilty, make you feel like you are not good enough, those often are very good red flags to see that actually this is not a healthy relationship, and that something is not right, something is not okay, and this is not okay. This is not okay treatment in a relationship, and therefore I should not be tolerating this sort of behavior within a relationship.
Nandipha, that's great. I want to come to sort of where this all, where this sort of all started. And what I'm speaking about is the broader norm that, or roles that have been assigned to genders. So generally, a role that has been assigned to males has been that they are the head of the house anyway. They are in control. They should be in control. And I believe that, because we hold sort of those very strong norms about what roles people should occupy, that often that is why it's difficult for women, I mean largely women, to recognize these smaller controlling mechanisms. And so, and we sometimes in the circles, I mean, I often say I'm a new feminist. I've been learning these new terms like patriarchy and that, what that system is, and I still don't fully understand it. But would it be okay for me to ask you maybe to describe what is a patriarchal system and how this sort of male control, if I may use that word, fits into the system and the communities and the culture that we live in?
Mm-hmm. So I'll say this, I'm a new feminist myself, really learning every day. But how I understand it is that a patriarchal system is one of inequality. So it's one that views the male person or the male identity as being superior to women, and women being less than in that system. So, you spoke about these roles and these expectations that we learn at a very young age. So that comes with the patriarchal society that we live in, where the male role or identity is given more power, more authority for being a male in the world that we live in today. So as women, from a very young age, as young girls, we are then taught that, or the way that we are socialized, the way that we live, that shows us that as women you have to be submissive. You have to recognize your place in the world, and your place in the world is below the male person. So we are raised in an unequal society, and in a society that doesn't view us as women, as girls, as being equal to the males or to the male role. And that really is where the problems start. Because if we are raising boys in a way that shows them that they have authority over women, and we are raising girls to accept that boys have authority over them, we are disempowering our girls, and we are doing a disjustice or a disservice to our boys. Because then this plays out in their relationships, in their intimate relationships, in the way that they relate to each other, in terms as boys or as men, generally, because these toxic masculinities that boys are socialized into don't only affect how they relate to girls, but it also affects how they relate to each other and how they then resolve conflict and resolve issues amongst themselves. So it can also result in harm in other boys, because there will be a lot of physical alterations. So a lot of high levels of assault, high levels of contact crimes against, other males, because of all these sort of ideas around masculinity as being this fixed, strong sort of persona or personality or identity. And that plays out in violent relationships, and it plays out in violent ways in the way that, boys exist in the world. So that is really how, in my view, patriarchy and the patriarchal system and society that we live in contributes to the high levels of gender-based violence that we see in the country.
Thank you, Nandipha, for that explanation. I mean, it lays it out so brilliantly. I'm often fascinated by the way that women also hold patriarchal views, so women and girls. And you spoke about the socialization that happens on sort of both sides, right? And some of those I just wanted to, before we go to break, look at, a couple of ways that those gender stereotypes really, or those gender norms really affect women in a broader sense. So it contributes to domestic violence, and I think we're going to speak a lot about that after the break. But before we go, also what type of career you have, the way that you dress, the way, other types of decisions. Could you just give a couple of ways that how holding those norms can restrict women?
So it can restrict them in the two ways that you've already mentioned, but also in how women view themselves. So a lot of women, as a result of these, these norms, view themselves as not being good enough. So that limits their ability to really take on the world and do things and self-actualize in a way that can lead them, or in a way that can help them really explore and be at their full potential. Because if you feel like you are not good enough, you are not smart enough, that girls are not good at science and maths, and boys are good at science and math, that girls are not strong, that girls have to be in the home, because as a girl you have to be nurturing, you have to be kind. So your role is within the home, and you are expected to do things that are within the home. And that some certain careers are not for women, or are not for girls. Like, for example, if you're a girl, you have to be in your more feminine sort of careers, like social work. I mean, I'm a social worker myself. Like social work, you have to be a nurse, you have to be a teacher, like all of these sort of roles that involve this nurturing, caring side of a person. Whereas if you are a boy, you can be an engineer, you can be the president, even, because we are expecting as a society that boys, and we've given them the authority actually, that they can actualize into these very powerful beings, because they've already been given authority at a very young age, and can therefore take full potential of the opportunities that are presented to them. And they also have better access to those opportunities.
Nandipha, I'm so sorry to cut you. We have to take a short break. I also, just before we go, I want to say, it limits boys' potential as well. I'm just thinking, if they want to be a social worker or do something that is viewed as feminine. But we need to take a short break, and we'll be back with more after this.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are speaking about harmful cultural norms. Joining me in studio is Nandipha Ganya, who's the programs manager at the MOSAIC Training Service and Healing Center. And Nandipha, before the break, we were speaking about sort of just broadly outlining what harmful norms are, sort of our harmful norms in terms of the patriarchal system, where men are placed at the head of the household and sort of and are given, more power within the household and broader systems and institutions. But the release or the narrative that MOSAIC had put out also was how harmful cultural norms contribute to domestic violence. We touched a little bit on that, but one of the things that came up that was really interesting for me was also normalizing staying in violent, intimate partner relationships. And so this is a huge issue. One of the biggest questions that are asked often of women who are in abusive relationships is, why don't they leave? So can you tell us how, which harmful norms contribute to women staying? Which I think, which sort of beliefs contribute to women staying in abusive relationships?
One of them is that as women, we are really, told to aspire to marriage. So being married comes with a certain status in our society. Similarly with things like having children and having a family. So once that status has then been acquired, letting go of that status can be seen as a failure. And that is where the issue is, because women who are divorced or who leave relationships are seen as failures and should therefore feel shame. Because of the value that has been placed on on that role or that expectation of women in our societies. So women then will stay in abusive relationships because it is difficult to leave because of all these. They don't want to feel like shame. They don't want to feel like failures. They don't want to feel the shame, and they don't want to have the stigma of being a divorcee. In today's society, but also because often in abusive relationships, the social support system of that woman has been broken down. So that control over her has led to broken family or broken links, to extended family. So she might not be on good terms with her family because maybe she's been told that your family doesn't like me. And that was one of the things or one of the ways that was used to keep her within the home, to maintain that control over her. So this makes it difficult for women to leave, because who's going to believe that this person who presents as this respectful and kind person, to other people, is really a monster inside the home? So it makes it even more difficult for women, but also distrust of the justice system, or maybe having a lack of knowledge of the justice system and how it can protect women, is also one of the things that can make women stay in abusive relationships, because maybe they don't know what is available, and they don't know the different roles and services that are provided for within the justice system. Or maybe they've accessed or tried to access the justice system and have been failed by it, or have had a negative experience, with it, and therefore don't trust it anymore. So they don't then want to go that route. So there are many things that go, into, or that can make a woman stay in an abusive relationship. It's not because she likes the abuse, and it's not because, she's choosing the abuse.
Yeah.
But there are many other, factors that go into it.
Yeah, no, I love that you're saying that, because it's so easy to say that a woman must leave. You're making me think there was a case a few months ago, I'm not sure when, where an abused woman's story was sort of splashed across social media and the news. And a few weeks later, or maybe a week later, the paper did a follow-up story to say that she had gone back. And, there was so much judgment. But one thing stuck with me. She just said, he's my partner. He helps me. Who else is going to build my Wendy house? And I remembered that. And I posted it myself. And I just said, exactly, who else is going to build that Wendy house? And so who are we to judge if we don't know whether she's even got somewhere to go afterwards. And I also wanted to say, I love that you brought up the stigma of divorce. I often say, and this speaks again, I think, to when we think about norms and beliefs and where they come from. When I got divorced, I often tell people, and I said proudly, I come from a long line of divorced women. But the thing is that I had no problem, I didn't think about shame or stigma or any of those things because I had seen a lot of women leave relationships that no longer serve them. And it was interesting because I think on the other side, there was a lot of shame around that and a lot of embarrassment. And I think, and also, when you say women are seen as a failure, it's also seen as a very public failure because everybody knows it's a failure that affects not only the woman, but it affects the family. I had someone on my show who said, she was enduring heavy abuse, and when she approached her family, her father said to her, well, no one else has ever divorced in our family, and if you do this, you will bring shame on the family. And I want to ask Nandipha, so from MOSAIC's perspective that counsels women, how do you respond to that? So what are some things that you can tell women in terms of how to think about that shame and that guilt and that expectation?
So I just want to quickly go back to the story that you shared a bit earlier about the woman who went back.
Yes.
So what is also a very big misconception is that a lot of people don't understand the cycle of violence and how that has such a big, or that how and the role that it plays within a relationship. So a woman can seek help and then go back because they are still hopeful that this person is going to change. And maybe after they had left, they were pursuing them. So doing things that were aimed at trying to get them back, And then, of course, they're going to go back because they love this person. They've invested themselves. They've invested time. They've invested money. They've invested other sort of resources into this relationship because they are hopeful about it. They are hopeful that this person is going to change and this is their partner. But also the realities of many women is that they are unemployed and therefore are financially dependent on their partners. So she's right when she says, who else is going to build a Wendy house for me? Because maybe that is her reality. She's not employed. She doesn't have the means to build it herself. So she goes back to the source of the income or the source of that financial support. So I just wanted to speak a bit about that. And then in terms of what we can tell women, around the stigma of divorce, a lot of counseling of domestic violence survivors is really working with the person to rebuild themselves. So you're helping the survivor or the woman to see themselves as a person again. You're helping them to see and to get in touch with their own personal values, to get in touch with the side of them that sees a future for themselves beyond the abuse that they are enduring or beyond the current relationship that is abusive. So a lot of that is really working with them to rebuild their sense of self and their their self-esteem, their self-confidence, so that they can then be at a position where they can tackle such things as that stigma that comes with leaving a marriage, and being strong enough, emotionally and otherwise, to be at a point to say, it might not have been done before, but it is not okay for me. And in terms of my boundaries as a person, in terms of what I want in a relationship, in terms of what I see for myself, this abusive relationship is not that. And therefore, I am choosing something that works for me and being okay with that. Because it's not everything that you choose, right? That others, like your family, is going to be okay with. So as a person, you have to be strong enough and have to be supported to get to that point where you can stand up for yourself and assert yourself, and really maintain your boundaries and maintain the standards that you want for your life.
Thank you, Nandipha. I also just want to speak about one of the other harmful norms that was mentioned, and it was phrased as legitimizing violence as a means to assert male authority. And this was very interesting for me. You mentioned something earlier. You mentioned about, when we were speaking about why women don't leave, you mentioned that oftentimes the systems that are supposed to support women when they leave do not work as they are supposed to, and the justice system is one of that. I know that this norm wasn't phrased specifically looking at that, but one of the things is our low response or our inadequate response to violence against women, and in a way this legitimizes that violence. If someone harms you and you do report it, or you do apply for a protection order, but it is not granted or your experience is minimized, we know that these cultural norms even live within the people in the system that are supposed to protect us. So can you just speak a little bit about how violence against women, how male violence is legitimized?
I love that you mentioned that, the system is people. So as people, we bring ourselves into our work. We bring our own beliefs, we bring our own values, we bring our own lived experiences into the workspace, right? So one of the ways that violence against women is then legitimized is, for example, if a woman goes, to report, to open a case, and then she is turned away or told that, you guys can work this out, you guys can talk this out. That's one of the ways that then signals that it's okay what is happening, because there is no help that is available. So that's the message that goes out. And it reinforces often what has been told to her by the perpetrator, that no one cares and nothing is going to happen. You can go and report, nothing is going to happen. So really, if she does, get the chance to go and report and then is turned away, it reinforces that, in her mind, that nothing is going to happen. So this is the way things are going to be, because there's no one to protect you. There's no help for you. This is it for you. And it's such a dangerous sort of message that then goes to survivors, because a lot of women will then stop trying to access services, to access protection, because they haven't received it. And now it's become a reality for them that there is no help that is available, which is a sad state of affairs, for a lot of women who have been failed by the many systems that are meant to protect them in many ways.
Nandipha, so it really does sound like a sad state of affairs. This was often sort of the middle moment for me, where it's sounding extremely, I want to say depressing, but also makes us feel so helpless, right? So what are the ways, and when I speak to survivors, sometimes I say, you need to shift your expectation that, and understand that if you go into the system, some people are not going to help you, but that's not everybody. You have to sort of keep going until you find, you got to, I think, push past those cultural norms and beliefs that are turning you away. What are some ways or some advice, I think, that you could give to women who are considering leaving, who are considering sort of, taking a stand? What could they do, and what can they expect when they go into the system and try to make a shift in their lives?
So really, it is that help is available. I think that's the foremost thing that women need to know, that help is available, and it might not be in the justice system only. There are many other avenues of support that are available to women. I mean, we've got victim empowerment programs, we've got shelters, we've got organizations that provide psychosocial support, we've got organizations that provide empowerment programs. We've got organizations that support women, within the justice system. I mean, we've got a court support program ourselves, but there are many others as well. So help is available, and you don't only need to go to the police station to access certain services. There are many services that are available to survivors. That's number one. And then number two is that it is okay, to seek help. The violence and the abuse is not your fault. That also is very important for survivors to know, that you didn't cause the abuse. You don't deserve the abuse, and therefore you don't have to put up with the abuse. There are many avenues of support that are available to you, and we are one of those organizations that provide, that support. And, as you said, that not everyone within the system is going to be helpful to you, but you keep going until you get help, because there are many good people who are doing incredible work within all of these systems that limit them, but also limit, the beneficiaries or you as a person who's trying to access the service. So there are many good people who are really there to support and help survivors. So keep going. Don't be, discouraged. And also, it is your right. I think that is also equally important for women to remember, that they have right to services as well, just as perpetrators have rights to services as well.
And I think central to it is really also they have a right not to be abused and to live a life free from violence, which is the number one sort of, this is enshrined in our constitution, and I think it's something that people don't actually know as a result of the cultural norms.
Absolutely.
I think, Nandipha, we have come to the end of our time together, but I want to say thank you so much for this very important conversation and for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity.
We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show. We are almost at the end of our time together, but before we go, we are going to watch a short video on how girls and boys are socialized to believe harmful cultural norms and how we can better raise kind boys and girls. Let's have a look.
You have to empower girls, but you have to give complementary education for boys, that they have to be egalitarian. You have to nurture this. You have to talk to them all the time, that of course girls can do this. You have to make movies that show that girls can do anything boys. They can drive trucks, they can be superheroes, including that of course you can marry Joe or Jack. You're teaching them about sexuality. This kind of work is important because masculinities is more rigid than femininities. So we allow girls a little more space to play with their identities. Boys, a lot more rigid as soon as they get to a certain age, that they can't wear certain things, they can't be pushing prams, but we allow girls to play with trucks. So you have to have this complementary work about patriarchy and about attitudes around equality for boys, girls, and other genders.
We talk about gender a lot, even with my son. He plays with dolls. They would tease him and say, "Hey, why are you playing with this? Why are you wearing this? Why are you wearing a skirt today?" I said, "There's nothing wrong. If he wants to play with girls, if he wants to put on a weave, it's okay. It suits him. And if we go to the shop, if he says, 'I want you to buy a doll for me,' the Barbie doll with high heels, I do that." And people at the shop would say, "Hi, but why are you buying a boy this?" I said, "He wants to." And I would educate them, even at the mall, say, "Listen here, if I buy this, I'm not buying this because I want him to be a lesbian or gay or what, but I'm teaching him nurturing because he's going to be a father. So you must know that if you've got a girl, you must do certain things to a girl. You must buy pads and so on. So he's fully aware. If I ask him if I'm taking a bath, he said, oh, please bring me panty liner. He will know what a panty liner is. Even all of them, they know, because that's how I am. I'm open. That's the kind of relationship we have.
You have to think very hard about the work that you need to put in raising kind, generous, happy, egalitarian boy. Actually, this is a lot of work, a lot of invisible work.
How are we empowering girl children when they have to constantly be the ones to, to push back? And so you've got to get men, male identifying people, masculinities, to recognize how they will benefit from an egalitarian society, that they can have more engaged relationships with other men, more engaged relationships with their intimate partners, more engaged relationships, with their children. And I think this is something that we were talking about before in some of the research that we've been doing, the workshops we've been doing. There was a little boy who was playing with a shoe, and he was tying it on his back, and he was putting it to sleep, and all that kind of thing. And so our colleagues in the workshop raised the issue of whether he could have a doll. And that, that's just gone one step too feminine. But then we're surprised when, when young men grow up to become completely disengaged and, and unable to care and empathize and, look after children.
The work of raising girls who are amazing, who are awesome, is a constant thing. It just has to happen every day, talking about it, modeling. But then if the neighbor doesn't raise boys to be like that, you have a problem. You really have a problem, because the violence is going to be there, the inequality, they just pushing back that, no, you think you're awesome, but I'm going to show you're not awesome. You can't be walking here, you can be in this space.
I just wish I could unsee a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing and not care, because it just makes you think too much, right? But I feel like the opposite burden, I actually don't want to have it, where I become complicit by not seeing and not caring.
So if there's inequality outside and you are this family, you're this person, what do you do with it? Do you live it forever?
What do you mean?
The inequality that you see outside, in the school, you take your kid to school and they're teaching them gender is this. This is how it is. You can't stand in this queue. You can't do this. You can't want to play soccer because soccer is only for boys. You can't do robotics. Robotics only for boys. You can't play the guitar. So they're always streaming your child. What do you do with that?
And that brings us to the end of our time together. Remember, you have a right to live a life free from violence. That's all we have for this evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lenina Rasool. Good night.